Late 1500s Italy. Violence brews as the Protestant Reformation begins, challenging the Catholic Church and papal authority. Consequently, many people suffered, including significant figures such as Galileo. But a critical thinker who suffered even greater was the philosopher Tomaso Campanella. You see, Campanella did not believe in miracles, he did not believe in heaven or hell. Instead, he believed that the Church has promoted such superstitions to control the common folk by keeping them within fear. Such contrarian notions were, of course, atheistic, and Campanella carelessly shared them publicly. Hence, in 1593, the Inquisition had him imprisoned. 6 years later, he was confined to a monastery in Naples as a form of partial release. However, while there, he became involved in a plan to fight and overthrow the Spanish invaders of southern Italy. Consequently, the Italian Inquisition and their counterparts had him imprisoned again. This time, however, he was tortured to understand the true nature of his contrarian beliefs. One method of torture was la vella. La vella was a torture method which slowly suspends the victims onto sharp spikes which pierce skin at the slightest contact. During this brutal time period, Campanella learned and understood more about how power worked. Now, he was not going to renounce his beliefs. However, what he would do was disguise their outwards appearance. In other words, a change in strategy, but not a change in his beliefs. First, to save his life from the brutal tortures, he decided to plead insanity. These contrarian notions were apparently deriving from some uncontrollable part of his mind. And so the tortures continued a little while longer, but eventually his sentence was changed to life in prison. During the first 4 years, he was chained to the wall of a dungeon, but nonetheless, he continued to write. However, now, he was not going to be as careless with sharing his notions. Rather, he was going to be a lot more strategic in sharing them indirectly. One book he wrote, The Hispanic Monarchy, explained that Spain had some divine mission to expand all across the world. Now, of course, these ideas were actually completely opposite to his own. It was simply just a bold attempt to illustrate his conversion to orthodoxy. And it actually worked. 6 years later, he was released from prison, now a free man. Then, once free from prison, he wrote Atheism Conquered, a book which actually attacked free thinkers. But you see, the book was formatted in a way of debates from one side and the other. The heretic beliefs were being countered by the superiority of Catholicism. So after publishing this, certainly this must have meant he was reformed. But was he really? When people finally read the book, they quickly realized that the arguments of the heretics had never before been expressed outside of this book. The arguments from the side that he was supposed to be defending for Catholicism, on the other hand, were filled with cliches and convoluted rationales. The arguments of the heretics seemed very bold and convincing. Meanwhile, the arguments for Catholicism, which he was supposed to apparently be defending, seemed very unconvincing and tiresome. But he was only using arguments that the Catholics themselves were using, and despite the very convincing arguments in that book from the heretics, nobody could really claim that he deserved to be imprisoned again. So what really transpired was that Campanella had pulled a 4D chess move. He was able to publish his opinions indirectly by pretending to argue against them. While pretending to disagree with his own opinions, he at the same time gave those opinions expression and exposure without having to be tortured again. So he was able to get everybody who wanted to hear these opinions to understand his intentions, while everybody else just looked away. And this book actually gained a lot of popularity amongst other people who agreed with him, becoming sort of a Bible for them. In society, there will always be people who rebel against oppression, sharing ideas which are perhaps ahead of their time. But like Campanella, you must realize that there's no point in making a display of these contrarian notions if they only bring you suffering and persecution. Martyrdom serves no purpose. It's better to live on in an oppressive world and even to thrive in it. If you must share your ideas to people who may potentially understand you, you just have to be very strategic in delivering your ideas. It doesn't mean you have to reform them. You could think how you please. Just be more delicate in your delivery. From a young age, we learn to tell lies and disguise our true feelings. Complete true expression is a social impossibility. Most of us, this comes naturally. Just check the comment section of any girl's Instagram post, regardless of who she is. However, there are people on the other hand who find this unbearable and an infringement on their freedom. They feel some need to, no matter what, they need to share their contrarian beliefs and superior values. Nevertheless, their arguments seem to convince very few and offend many. Clever people, on the other hand, understand that they could display normal behavior, talk conventionally, without actually thinking this way. Sam Bankman-Fried is a perfect example of this. He never actually believed any of the woke ideology that he was constantly preaching. He just understood that he needed the media support as well as the general public in order for FTX to thrive despite the fraud. It's not a coincidence that the overwhelming majority of large companies share and preach these same beliefs. But behind closed doors, the executives obviously don't give a fuck. They only care about the ESG scores, the media support, and the bottom line. They don't actually care about their own opinions being out there. And even in day-to-day life, nobody likes the brutally honest friend. Nobody likes the friend who's constantly disagreeing with the general consensus of the group. I know you think that you're the smartest person in the room, but in reality, the real smartest person in the room is that one friend who actually silently agrees with your very complex opinions, but nonetheless doesn't say anything because he doesn't want to make any enemies. Trust me, the quality of your life will be so much better if you just pretend to think normally. You don't have to think normally, but start watching some mainstream TV shows, listen to some mainstream music, so you can converse with normal people. I know a lot of you guys watching this channel right now are very complex thinkers, and that's why you gravitate towards these types of videos, especially some of the topics we've covered in the past are very contrarian. These are things you should never be discussing publicly. You're not going to gain any friends by doing this. You could continue to think this way, but it's in your best interest to pretend to act normal. I guarantee you your quality of life will be so much better. And if you really must express your opinions, only do it with your closest friends, and even then, like Campanella, you should try to be strategic with it. Try to deliver them in a sort of way where perhaps you're arguing against them and maybe considering them. Now, speaking beyond day-to-day life, if you're somebody who's aiming to be in a position of power, you don't want to share these contrarian notions until you've actually achieved that power. Just like somebody, an elected official, they are not sharing so many of these contrarian notions before they're elected, but rather they start executing them after they're elected. This is why so often people are surprised by somebody they elected doing something that they said they wouldn't do or never discussed before, because otherwise they would have never been elected. For a long time, I have not said what I believed, nor do I believe what I say. And if indeed I do tell the truth, I hide it among so many lies that it's hard to find. Machiavelli.